So I want to thank everyone for coming in as we start our fall season. You know, the summer seemed to go on forever, but thrilled tonight to be working with the great folks led by Juliet over at APA. So we're so happy to start our season with you guys. I need to thank a few of the people that are always with us: Photo Shelter, Epson, Pro Photo Daily, American Photographer, Archive Magazine. We have a great lineup. I encourage everyone to go to projections.live to see our lineup for the fall season. We really have a lot of terrific photographers. In fact, next month we'll have a bunch of fine art artists on, including Erin, who's with us tonight. I also encourage everyone to go to YouTube and subscribe to Projections NYC. That would be really helpful for us. And with that, we turn it over to Juliet Wolf-Robin, who is the president of APA. And it's all yours, Juliet.
Great. Well, actually, I am Juliet Wolf-Robin, but I'm the National Executive Director. We have a board of directors, so there is a president, Tony Gale. And that's the way the association works. So APA is a not-for-profit trade association for professional photographers, mainly people working in advertising, editorial, entertainment, commercial sectors. It's an association run by photographers for photographers. And the APA Awards is our national competition, and we have 14 different categories. So there are food, documentary, sports, travel, animals, fashion, things within our industry. And we get 14 different jurors who each look at 2 different categories. And the jurors that we get are art producers and photo editors. They work at ad agencies, publications, galleries. And then they look at all the images that are submitted. They're the ones who do the selection completely. They go through several rounds. So there's a round where they're picking their favorite images. Those are combined together with other jurors. Then there's a scoring that happens. And then when they have their finals, then the jurors talk to each other to agree on first, second, third place. So that way I make sure everybody has seen everything. They know what's being selected. It's a great way to do it. It's also completely blind to them as far as who the photographer is. There's no indication. The images have numbers on them. They can't see who the photographer is. They don't know anything about the image. And then at the end, they only find out who the photographers are at the same time as we announce it publicly. So when it's official, they get to find out who they selected. They look at all the first place winners. That's how they pick best of show. It's a really fair competition, I feel, the way that we do it, and allows the jurors to really participate with each other in selecting the images. And it's certainly really competitive because we have so many great professional photographers who are entering the contest. So today we're looking at 3 of the APA award winners. You can see them all on apanational.org. You can go to the awards section and look at all the winners. We're in the process of producing the book if you wanted to order a copy of the book. And the 3 winners that we have here today are from the lifestyle, personal projects, and portrait categories: Dana Hursey, Susan Chen, and John Davidson. So I'm first going to introduce you to Dana Hursey, who's going to go first here. Dana Hursey is an award-winning Los Angeles-based commercial advertising photographer and Southern California native, a graduate of and frequent instructor at Art Center College of Design. Dana's broad-based knowledge has offered him the opportunity to shoot for a wide range of clients. Dana imbues a sense of vibrancy, cleanliness, and humor, whether it's lifestyle, still life, or quirky conceptual images. His work has been exhibited here and abroad. His years of experience have afforded him the privilege of serving on boards of several organizations, including serving currently as Senior Vice President of APA National. In addition to his acclaimed portraits from the 14 Days of Great Britain documentary project, Dana recently completed a compilation cookbook featuring portraits and recipes from 35 of LA's top chefs. Yum. So if you want to know where to go eat in LA, talk to Dana. So pass it over to Dana, and we'll introduce the others when they come up.
Thanks so much, Juliet, and thanks, Frank, for having us. This is going to be really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share a little bit of work with you. It will initially be gray. Don't worry, because images will show eventually. Okay.
What wine are we drinking, sweetheart?
So I was going to talk a little. I'm pretty much going to share a bunch of my commercial work. Most of it's recent. I think it's all recent. Partly because I kind of want to talk a little bit about finding your voice, because it's something that I actually struggled with for the bulk of my career. I would say I actually didn't find my photographic voice for decades, which kind of reveals my age, I think, unfortunately. But, you know, about 10, 11 years ago during the recession, I really connected with my retoucher of decades, and we kind of developed a look that it morphed over time. But at the time, it was really trying to kind of push an illustration component into the photography. And also I started to really develop a vibrancy, a graphicness. I mean, I've always had a graphic nature to my work, and I've always kind of leaned into vibrancy and contrast. And a combination of that with this new look just really started to resonate with me. And so part of why I wanted to talk a little bit about this is because I struggled with it for so long. A longtime friend who was a rep back in the day used to call me the executor. And it was not necessarily, she meant it as a compliment, but it wasn't necessarily a compliment, because what she was saying is that, you know, hand Dana a layout and he will execute it. He'll give you exactly what you want from that layout. But ultimately what that meant is that I wasn't necessarily injecting anything additional into it. And so once again, you know, a couple decades into my career, when I started to kind of finally find a voice and feel like I had something to say, is when I feel my work took off. I feel that my work actually started to have a consistency to it and a uniqueness. And now I'm kind of humbled and thrilled when people say, oh yeah, when I see one of your images, I know it's one of your images. Yeah, so a lot of these have been commercial clients that have come in and asked for that specific thing. The tough part about it is that it is kind of very niche. It's a very particular style. And so, you know, it's not going to be broadly used. This image and the next were both editorial pieces. These were for an article on DJs and people who are big in the rave world. And so it was an editorial article for that. But again, I love, you know, my go-to is contrast, vibrance, but also on the storytelling part, it's humor. I'm very much enjoying doing work that I consider to be a little on the retro side.
Dana, when do you know that you found your voice?
About 5 years after you find it.
Okay.
You know, it's for me, it's when I started to produce things that were consistent, and definitely were my own. These pieces, this series, this next three were done for the Newport Beach Film Festival. We actually shot this this was shot a month before shutdown. So it was for last year's film festival, which ultimately got canceled. And so they're going to run for this year's film festival. But I'm always kind of surprised when people come to me. I'm a little reserved in wanting to push my style on anybody, even though that's kind of what I'm known for now. So I'm always thrilled when somebody says, oh, no, we want you to go full bore and really, inject your vision on a particular campaign. This and the next one, and we shot a bunch for this ad campaign for a paper product. It was actually shot the Thursday before shutdown. And then they didn't run it for almost a full year because they didn't need to advertise for these products. This was the first campaign that we shot during COVID. This was shot in May, and we had San Diego Gas and Electric come to us because with everybody having been staying at home for several months, they were starting to do home improvements, and San Diego Gas and Electric started to get an onslaught of calls of people digging on their property and hitting gas and electric lines. And so they kind of wanted to quickly put together this public safety campaign about, calling 811 before you dig someplace. And we did both these print pieces, but then we also, the shoot was a 2-day shoot, and we did a very meticulous long shoot to do a stop motion animation, which ended up being a 15 and 30-second commercial that ran. And this is the commercial, and forgive me if the sound is a little low on this.
Sometimes it's obvious where not to dig. For everywhere else, like your yard, call 811. And we'll help you avoid hitting underground gas and electric lines. Remember, 811 before you dig.
So that was supposed to be just a, this is a little bit of behind the scenes from some other COVID productions that we've done. But the one for 811 Dig was just supposed to be for web, but the client liked it so much that they pushed it on to broadcast. So these are some of the finished images from that BTS that you just saw.
So the way you filmed it could be used for either a medium?
It could have, yes. We didn't end up doing that, but everything was shot high res stills and then put into that stop motion animation. So yeah, it was thousands and thousands of individual frames to make that. So these were all for a pharma client.
So then when you shot that, did you know it was going to TV?
No. We thought it was simply going to be just web assets, just kind of an add-on for social. But the client ended up liking it so much that they then bought a license. They relicensed it for broadcast.
Great.
We just shot this in March. And I always say that COVID was not the challenging part of this particular shoot.
Were they both there on the same day?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was a 1-day shoot, and we were piggybacking on it, the commercial portion of it. And it was interesting to say the least. These next few are some images from personal series that I've done, most of them during COVID. So when we weren't able to get talent in front of the camera immediately, I started looking for other things that would cooperate with me. And again, kind of really leaning into the graphic, vibrant look. And I think that's what, what really, Frank and I have actually talked about this. I've always been a generalist. I started my career as a generalist, and it doesn't always serve you well, but ultimately what happened is that the look that I developed turned out to be the unifying thing in my work. So whether I'm shooting people, product, whatever it is, that's kind of the thing that makes it mine. And I'm a firm believer, even though the industry may not be, I'm a firm believer. If you love being a generalist or you love shooting a variety of things, there's no reason not to do it. It's about injecting your voice into whatever it is that you're shooting.
to your point earlier on, every one of these looks like you shot it. And that's
Yeah.
George must be the happiest rep in town. Great.
And some of these, like this series of drinks that I just finished, it was, about, I had known about a food stylist for years, and we've actually almost worked together several times, and it just never happened. And so we just took the opportunity to get together, and so that I could work with her once before, we actually do a job together.
That's sort of interesting, right? You and her have been in the business forever, and you're still doing test shoots.
Oh, yeah.
How that is just beautiful. That is just beautiful.
I did a test shoot just last Friday, but finally with some people. I don't have that stuff in my presentation because it's not ready for prime time yet, but it feels good to test. I mean, and back when I was an executor and I didn't have my voice, it was really hard for me to test. I would test maybe once a year, and I'd be lucky if I did that. But now that I feel like I've got something to say finally, and so it makes testing a lot easier. Doesn't make it any cheaper, but it makes it easier. This is a whole campaign that we did for Lowe's, and again, they came to me specifically because they wanted this particular look.
And Dana, make sure that you integrate that story that you told me last week, just because that's a great little antidote.
Yeah, so Frank and I were chatting, and I was talking about the fact that we've just always got to keep marketing. And one of the things I do is I have a CRM, or a client, a database basically, but I have some software that, when I've got a good client, somebody I've worked with before, or somebody I've shown my book to, I always kind of tag them in that software to remind me to reach out to them every quarter. I'm kind of anal retentive that way. If there's something I'm very organized. But this software, which is just you can probably do this with most pieces of software. It literally reminds me, it's like, oh, you haven't talked to Bob, make sure to reach out to him, kind of thing. And I set them for every quarter. And so about a month and a half ago, I got a slew of alerts saying, hey, it's time, reach out to these people. And I'm just kind of like rolling my eyes, like, okay, here we go. I got to do these. And so I'm typing an email to these various people that I need to reach out to. And one of them was a client that I worked with before. That pharma campaign that I just showed with the people jumping through the air, it was that agency. And so I just sent off an email because we'd shot in October. I hadn't talked to them. It's like, hey, just wanted to remind you, about, that we're here. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope the campaign that we shot is doing great. Sent that off. And it's just, I get no responses from these. I send them out. It's just a matter of staying front of mind for all these people. And so I sent one off to them. They were like in the middle of the pack. 3 minutes later, hand to God, 3 minutes later, I get a return email saying, hey, we've got this campaign that we want to shoot. Would you, do an estimate for this? And I actually just shot the job a week and a half ago, and we're in post-production now. And it was that pinging, that little poke, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, had I not sent that out, would you guys have called me in on this job? So, and it's one of those things, you just never know where the next gig is coming from. And so for me, it's a matter of staying front of mind. And the fact that I got an instant result is fantastic and horrible, because it means, oh my God, I got to keep doing this. I've got to keep reaching out.
If there's nothing else that we get from this night, it's that
Yeah.
story right there is just the essence of being a commercial photographer.
Yeah, it's always staying front of mind, because it's whoever's crossing the desk at the time that they've got a gig. I'm stopping here because this is the image that I'd entered into the AP Awards, and it was part of a campaign for fatherhood.gov, and they do this humorous campaign every couple of years to try and encourage engagement between fathers and their kids. So this is the image that I entered into the competition, and so we were actually, again, shooting this side by side with a commercial production. And even with that, we were really doing our own thing. We cast our own talent. We were using different spaces in the location. And we actually shot on a separate day. But this was all for that campaign. And this was running nationwide. It was on bus benches and some billboards and stuff. And I have a little behind the scenes of that too.
Great. Yeah. Dana, can you just speak a little bit to how you, when you're thinking of entering a competition, how many images, campaigns, single images, what's your thought process, just to give people insight on that end?
Well, I have to say, first part of my career, I didn't do awards at all. And I'm not sure, I've been doing them for a long time now, but for me, obviously it's the new work, whatever I've done recently, I'm trying to enter. And my thought process is, one more time, the awards, the competitions for me are not about winning prizes. It's PR. It's getting my work in front of the judges. It's getting my work out there where more people are going to see it. And so even if I don't win, I'm entering my latest work, obviously the stuff that I think is the best and stuff that I want to do, so that people see it. Sometimes I'll do, if I've shot something that's very cohesive in a campaign, I'll enter it as a campaign if the competition allows you to do that. Some of them are single image only. But I really do try, the other strange thing that I've experienced, which I don't know if other people experience this, there are certain award or competitions that are a good fit for me. Some of them are not. And, regardless of how many times I enter, I'll never be acknowledged in any way, shape, or form. That being said, this is the first time I've ever won an APA award. So again, you never know. So, but yeah, I try and enter, the bulk, not the bulk of them. There's at least 8 to 10 that I enter every year. And it's just, what's my recent work if it's a good fit. And I feel this is the end of the commercial stuff. And I'm probably coming up on my time here. So it's always good to end on animal shots, because then everybody goes, oh, you kind of win the room. So I've got a couple projects. I can do we want to do Q&A, or should I blast through a couple real quick?
Just to go through quick.
Yeah. So this is the Cart for a Cause cookbook that Juliet mentioned, where we shot 35 of LA's top chefs for a charity cookbook for Meals on Wheels. So we shot the portrait of the chef, their branding, and then the recipe that they contributed to the book. So not all 35. And then the other project that she mentioned was a 14 Days in Great Britain, which is getting a little long in the tooth, but I keep it because the producer of this documentary project is talking about picking it up again. But what we did here is we went across Great Britain. We did 14 cities in 14 days, from the Isles of Northern Scotland all the way down to London. And in this project, I was the environmental photographer. There was also a studio photographer doing a very Irving Penn white seamless kind of portraits. And then there was a video element to it, and that all got woven into a motion picture documentary. But across the 14 days, I shot over 650 portraits of people just off the street. And so this was something that was way outside my wheelhouse. I was not comfortable on this trip at all. When I got done with the trip, I was exhausted, and I said, I will never do anything like that ever again in my life. And then a year later, the producer called and said, hey, we're thinking about doing Rush. I said, I'm on board. It didn't happen, but I would actually do this again in a heartbeat, even though it was a grueling project and actually quite emotional.
Great. And this ends up being a book, Dana?
Yeah, it was a book, but it was also the more important thing is it was a 90-minute documentary. So these were woven into video interviews that they did with a lot of the same people that we photographed.
Okay. Great. Wow, terrific. All right. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat room, or just open up everyone's mic, and if anyone has any questions, that'd be great. But that all that is. So will that project keep on coming back, Dana? Do you know? You have a feel?
I don't know. I spoke to the producer in August, and he said he was getting ready to pick it back up again. But I have not heard from him since. So I do not know, but I got some great imagery from it. So I'm thrilled.
So here's a good question. Is it hard to maintain your voice when working commercial gigs?
I don't think so. I tend to project that, yes, it would be. But I am always surprised when the clients are saying, no, we want you, that's why we came to you. We saw your work. That's what we want injected into this. And again, when I was young, I was always very intimidated. It's like, no, I just need to produce what they want, not realizing they're coming to me because they want your input in the process.
Yeah, and how does that relate to competition? Being that everybody's a photographer, right? I mean, you get now, you're in this niche that I want the way Dana shoots. It helps you, right? I mean, by having that clear vision.
It does. It absolutely does. At the same time, again, I look at it, and it is kind of so niche that sometimes, there's not enough of those jobs out there. I think that's my mentality.
Yeah.
That may not actually be true. But I think on a certain level, you don't want to create something so tight that there's no appeal to, you're going to have one or two clients a year. So, that's where, for me, being a generalist helps me, because maybe there isn't a food campaign, but there's a lifestyle campaign or a pharma campaign, where my style, my look can lend itself to different marketplaces.
Mm. And who shot the making of the videos? The behind the scenes.
Let's see, I'm trying to remember. I hired crews for all of those. So I've got my kind of go-to video guys that when we have a job and I think it's going to be a good make for good BTS, I'll hire a crew out of pocket and have them just film the entire thing.
That's with client approval.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
And
yeah, we always check with them first and just say, hey, we want to do BTS. Are you guys okay with this? And
usually they're fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Here's another question. I'm curious if during the executor period, if he was shooting any personal work as well. This is often where one style or look comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very valid and true. And I wasn't doing enough of it. I wasn't doing enough personal work. Like I said, when I was being an executor, it would be pulling teeth for me to test once a year. And my stuff ended up just looking back on it, very clean, very graphic, but no voice. And and I will say, for me, from my experience, and you know what, everybody comes to this on a different path. Everybody gets to where they're at in a completely different way, which is something that's so beautiful about this profession. The way I came to it, it was the recession that drove me. That's what helped me find my voice. It was like desperation. I'm sitting there with my retoucher going, what can we do? What can we do? Here's some imagery. How can we make this different? And it was working through that process with her that kind of, popped the lid on it.
It's interesting. Louisa Curtis is probably the smartest woman on the planet. And she wrote, now his work looks like it's personal. And that really crystallizes everything.
Yeah.
And that's why she is the smartest woman.
Thank you. Yes.
But that is really a great point. It really is. I mean, and that's what you and I discussed last week, right? It's your style. Great.
Yeah.
Well, that was terrific. I mean, Juliet, I jumped in there and asked a lot of things, so I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Right. Okay. Last question. Do you push your students to find their voice while in school?
Yeah. Yep. And for me, my mantra when I'm talking to students or anybody that's asking advice is, you absolutely, and because this is a life lesson I learned, and I learned it the hard way, you have to shoot the stuff you love. You have to shoot what you're passionate about. If you try and do what you think the market wants, your work is going to look boring like the first half of my career. You've got to shoot what you're passionate about, because that's the only way that voice comes out, I think.
Great. Well, Dana, thank you so much. That was really
thank you.
Terrific. Yeah, the insight is great. I think we all need to hear that as senior people and younger people and starting out people. To hear it again and again, it never grows old, because it's so stinking true.
Yeah.
True. So
thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for doing that very, very much. So let's take like a 1-2 minute break for everyone just to stretch, and we'll have Mr. Davidson right up after a short break.
Actually, Susan's next.
Okay. Great. My bad. Yeah, everyone yell at me. And while we're taking this break, I just want to remind everybody, if they could subscribe to us on YouTube, Projections NYC, that would be terrific. So let's just take one quick break, glass of water, and we'll be right back. Talk among yourselves.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Juliet.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
See, I thought you were in Chicago, but clearly you're at the beach.
I am at the beach every day. This is my happy place, even when
good.
it's snowing. Yeah, it was really kind of dreary in Chicago today, but not at my desk.
No.
Dana, thank you so much. It was just so great to hear everything you said. People can't hear it enough. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's lessons that took me a long time to learn, and it's if all of us can make anybody's path a little easier, it's totally worth it.
Amen to that.
That's exactly right. Okay, so Juliet, let's have you introduce Susan.
I'll wait till she comes back. Okay. So Susan J Chen, chosen by Saatchi Art, has one of the top 100 women artists. Susan is an award-winning fine art photographer with a conceptual approach in her photo and motion work. Her work has been described as cinematic, moody, and emotionally charged with color and dark humor. Her work has been shown in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Tokyo, Miami, Cataluna, Spain, and York, UK. She's won numerous awards for her photo and motion work, including the Art from the Art Directors Club, American Photography, PDN, Graphis, International Color Awards, and film festivals. Susan has also won one of the APA awards previously with a completely different style of work, and I think she's going to show that to us today as well. The APA award-winning image today is from her personal projects, or that category of our competition, and it's part of her latest work, The New Abnormal. It's been recognized with the ADC Awards in the APA LA Off the Clock competition that that APA also puts on, which was curated this year by Rebecca Morris of LACMA. and it'll be published in the upcoming American Photography 37 Annual and Exhibition in New York City this November, if they have it, hopefully. I welcome Susan. I also think, for somebody who's lived in San Francisco and LA and New York, it's probably an amazing resource of photography in different cities. So thank you for being here and can't wait to hear your story.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the intro. Yeah, I've been a little bit of a nomad of late. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. But I've landed in Brooklyn, where I was intended to be pre-pandemic, but something happened. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Just a little bit about me. I'm a conceptual photographer who shoots fine art. I, have a background. I trained with the legendary Mary Ellen Mark when she was alive, and Craig Cutler. So I think you'll see a little of those influences in my work. I don't shoot anything like what they shoot. And I will talk about what I do, because APA doesn't have a fine art category. I entered my work into the personal projects category, and that's what I will be showing you today. Hopefully you can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the theme of what I'll be talking about is pursuing personal work. And as Juliet had mentioned before, I'm a previous APA winner. This is the winning image from a couple of years ago. Which, at first it looks fun and colorful and bright and cheery and fun to look at. But this is, to me, a depiction of the American flag melting. This was shot during when Trump was president. And when I realized the significance of the American flag melting away, it was a very, sentiment that some of us feel that 2020 felt pretty shitty, but 2020 kind of felt like it was a long time coming too. So when I realized the significance of the American flag melting, I knew I needed to call this image "Making America Great Again." So I love that this image has a kind of 1-2 punch, because it's very pretty to look at, but then it has a deeper meaning to it. And I have to tell you, this image was a total accident. My friend, let me see if I can advance forward. My friend was moving out of his apartment, and he's like, "Here, take my food. It's gonna go bad. Take my popsicles." So I was like, "All right, sure." And then I just started messing around with it, and just taking pictures and just seeing what happens. So sometimes the personal work is just sort of something I'm exploring. I don't know an intent to shoot protest art. I didn't walk into this shooting I'm going to shoot a piece of protest art. It just happened, and sort of organically in what I was just sort of messing around and exploring with. So that's just something to kind of note, because a lot of my creative process is actually quite belabored. I actually kind of, because I'm a conceptual photographer, I sort of think and brew on ideas a long time, and I sketch them and I storyboard them and I talk about it endlessly. But this was a nice break, because this one just happened by pure accident. So Making America Great Again actually had a very good run. I think it just resonated just because of the political climate at the time. So it appeared in a lot of the few places as examples of what Juliet was talking about, in various award competitions and publications, and it was exhibited in San Francisco and LA and featured at Saatchi Art.
Yeah. Susan, one question.
Yeah.
Being that you, like you say, you like to think things through and conceptualize and on, was it hard for you to just go at this?
Yeah.
Or you knew right away it was going to be something terrific?
No, I had no idea. I was literally messing around. It is hard for me to just try something, just to feel something out. Almost like if you're looking at a blank page and you have a pencil, you start writing words or sketching, depending on your craft. That's really hard for me. I don't have an instinct to be like, oh, I'm just gonna doodle today. So this was my form of doodling, if you will. And then it was an amazing accident. This ended up becoming, for me, one of my best-selling limited edition prints.
Is that right?
It looks great. I mean, people, despite its political tone, it's something you can hang on the wall because it looks nice.
Well, and then in the APA competition, they don't even see a reference to anything. So they're really picking this because of the beauty of the image and not because of the understanding of what it meant.
Okay.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
Moving forward, does it change the way you work now?
I mean, I wish I could have more of these happy accidents. I think, if I'm able to sort of free up to allow the space and the brain space to do it, yes. A lot of times we get too busy, life gets in the way. Oh my God, there's 10 other things I can do, like wash my dishes or whatever, that, but I think if you can dedicate time to just sort of explore and let yourself kind of come to these things, that's also a really great creative approach. Something very more typical of my approach is something which I describe as very belabored and very thought through, and my concept to execution can often take a very long time. I started this series called The New Abnormal, and it's a social commentary also with a little tinge of black dark humor in it, because it's about climate change, but it's depicting about how society may have gotten a little used to it. But I'll kind of walk you slowly into that before I got into that realization, because this is the winning image from this year's competition of The New Abnormal. This one is called Mother and Child. And it's a part of a series that I'm going to show you. And I'm going to try to clarify what are my images versus reference images, because this was inspired by, in 2018, the campfire in the Bay Area happened. And that's where I was at the time in 2018. It was really terrible. The whole town of Paradise was burnt to a crisp, but it was gone. The fire didn't make it to San Francisco in the Bay Area where I was. However, the smoke floated over to the Bay Area and sat for 2 weeks, and was the first, I think, real kind of climate change really hitting our doorstep, because, a few years prior, we were talking about climate change is like, Greenland melting and polar bears swimming, in large bodies of water. But now in the sort of discussions around climate change, it's different now, because it's at our doorstep, and sadly, even worse now this year. Or each year we keep breaking records, right? But this is what inspired the series, and this is from the news media. These are not my photographs, but just to set the context of what the environment looked like on a normal day, and when you're sitting in a time period of, a mega fire out of control in your city. And what the sky looks like, and what the color of the sun and the color of the light is so freakish. It feels like you're disoriented because it doesn't make sense. Your brain cannot process what the everyday environment looks like. So during the campfire, it was like 2 weeks of still air, no wind. So the smoke sat over the city for a long time. And this is just the view out of my apartment. And this is during the day. And, you just were just amazed by what you were looking at outside your window. And that's the moon. It was quite extraordinary. So I started to observe what your home can look, how disorienting your home looked as well, with the sun coming in. That's the reflection of the window coming in, and how even your home can look very alien. And this idea of, like, looking out, looking in within your home and how different it is, but also looking outward, and how scary the outside world can look. Mind you, this image, this is my image here, was shot before the pandemic. This was shot in 2018, 19, before lockdown. So, right now, I think everybody's sort of used to seeing people in masks, but at the time I was shooting this, I mean, I think everyone thought I was crazy. I was putting people in masks. But scarily enough, I started to think about like what the future looked like. These are reference images. Obviously, I'm starting to look at the painter. This guy, Scott Lisfield. He paints what looks like Planet of the Apes, and depicting this astronaut sort of drop down into the world in the future, and kind of like David Bowie and Man Who Fell to Earth. Looking at a very sort of desolate, apocalyptic future. So I started kind of my imagination drifting into that area in terms of what my series could look like. And obviously I was heavily inspired by the future depicted by Blade Runner, shot by the amazing Roger Deakins, who I worship too. And so I started to think about and find locations too that had that kind of feeling, and I went location scouting and found this amazing dead tree that is just sort of like almost like tentacles, that's in the background there. And I worked, with this series, this was highly produced too, unlike the Popsicle, which was a total accident. This one was highly, organized and produced. I worked with casting and styling and props, and we shot this in plates in a studio and then on location. And this is the final image of that. This one's called Dead Bird.
And where have these images,
Yeah.
where are they, where are you planning to have them, or where have they appeared so far?
I still consider this series a work in progress. I do want to continue shooting some other scenes that I have in mind. So far, these have been in Art Directors Club. It won an award there. It will be in American Photography. The exhibition is happening in November. They emailed us. I know you were mentioning if it's still happening, but who knows, right? Things could still change. And this series also will be shown in England sometime. They haven't announced details, and I haven't announced it either because they don't want anybody. I think they want to share the news about the exhibition, but there's an exhibition in, I believe it's Bristol, England.
And how do you visualize the printing of these images? Like what kind of paper, or is it the size? Like how do you envision?
Yeah. I mean, these are to me, large scale tableau images, almost life size, somewhere around, at least 4 by 5 feet in size is my ideal. I haven't printed them that big for an exhibition yet, but that would be a goal.
And have you worked with a gallery before on getting these out there, or is it something that you're going to do on your own?
Yeah, I use Saatchi Art. They represent me. It's an online art gallery versus a brick and mortar. And yeah, they've been great. They've promoted me, and I've had some sales through there.
And how do those get printed? Do you print those and then supply them?
Yes, I have a lab. My lab is in San Francisco, where I have, done my prints. So that's my go-to is my lab in San Francisco.
They're stunning. I would love to see them. So.
Sure. So let's see. Let's keep going with more in the series here. I went searching for a pregnant lady. And also looking for landscapes that had sort of that, refinery
And Susan, what's the timeline on this? Like, how long have you been working on it so far?
Yeah, I started this when the campfire was in 2018. So in my head, it was kind of percolating. And then I started shooting it in 2019. And then, so I've been working on this since 2019. There was a little break in there with COVID, and also post-production took a little while because, as you can imagine, this was shot heavily with a lot of post-production work on it, which was quite ambitious for me because this is the most post-production I've ever done on any of my work.
Yeah. So Susan, just quickly, if you could explain how you come in and out of these kinds of moments, then live your normal day life, right? And then you get back to that. I find that so intense to try to understand your head. Like, how do you do that? That seems so intense.
Does this seem really dark? I actually,
No, not that it's dark. It's just, from one world to the other. Not.
Well, you know what the scary thing is like I had this idea for this series, but you know what's even more scary? This happened. Okay, in September 9th, 2020, this is not my picture. This is in real life, news media covered the day that the skies actually turned orange over San Francisco. So my social media and my phone like blew up because I was already working on this series. And then in real life, this happened. It was kind of shocking. And I was floored, and it actually kicked my butt to finish the series. And I started to look at some of the news media coverage of it, and like people were living their normal lives. Like, it's like people were taking selfies and taking pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge and out for a run. I was like, this is like the freakish day, and people are going about their lives. And that's how I ended up making my series a little bit more of a social commentary about how, people might just become used to living under climate change. This is just another day. So I had even seen a man when the city was sitting in smoke for 2 weeks. I saw a guy wearing a mask. He was vaping underneath his mask. And I saw that, I was like, I gotta shoot this. I gotta shoot a man vaping underneath these like apocalyptic skies. And then so I went scouting for this location and found this biblical looking kind of setting. That's me looking like a grumpy wet cat. But that was me location scouting. And that was, and we shot this in plates as well in a studio. My model Luke was pretty much enjoying having a smoke, so I felt bad. I kept asking him to take a puff, but he didn't seem to mind. And that's the final image.
Do you consider yourself an activist or an artist who's just reflecting what's happening?
Yeah, just an artist reflecting what's. It's just sort of I've responded off of what has happened. I don't think I've ever set about to shoot something in protest or with the intention of a message. It's sort of something that I find later on in the process. Like in this example here, I just thought, okay, if climate change is part of our normal life, like maybe red becomes a fashionable color. And so this one's called The Fashionista.
Does the idea of becoming an advocate, like Donna Ferrato has with domestic violence and Stephanie Sinclair with young brides, does that something that scares you, intrigues you, you want to stay away from?
Yeah, not really. For me, this is my brand of dark humor. I think I'm less of an advocate. Like I'm not advocating people to stop buying plastic and all that. Like this is more about me making fun of society maybe sort of getting kind of complacent with the effects of climate change. And this is, this is like, I'm not a documentary photographer, right? I'm not shooting this as a real thing. This is a conceptual image with a little bit of black humor in it of, hey, red becomes a fashionable color in this age of climate change. And instead of a snow day, hey, kids have fun during smoke day. And this is, I mentioned, this is where the series has been recognized and the exhibitions are pending COVID in November in New York, and then date TBD in England. So with that, I have more, but I'm not going to go through it because my goal was to get through just this series. And I'll just turn it over to you and Juliet for questions.
Great. That's really wonderful work. If anyone has any questions, they could jump in. They could put it on the chat room. So we can ask Susan anything we want. And when is a project over for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It never feels over, to be honest. Even stuff I've shot 5 years ago, I am still thinking about, and I'm still wanting to continue. I don't think I've ever felt anything is over. Maybe I have a hard time letting go too. But there's also like limitless possibilities, right? There's like a series can continue going in many different directions, you know, and maybe it's just like that realization that there's never an ending point.
And then at the same time as you have this project, do you have other series that have a completely different feel that you're working on at the same time, or is this your focus on this one?
I'm still focused on this one. I get like pretty singularly obsessed with something. Like, yeah, I end up getting all consumed with a particular project before I can step out of it. Yeah.
And so something that you did 5 years ago, you could find yourself going back to that and adding an image or 2 or 3.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and I have, and that's true for another series I did that started as commercial work, and then after the job was finished, I continued the series as personal work, photo and video. So if I really love an idea, I will keep chasing it.
You had mentioned we don't have a category of fine art, and actually the personal projects used to be called fine art, and I changed it to be called personal projects. But I'm curious, what does the difference to you mean? Like, what makes something a personal project versus fine art? Isn't all fine art personal?
I don't think so. I think they're different. A personal project, I think, can be broader. It can be like, it could be a commercial job that you were just sort of exploring a tangent that, is your own personal take or on a client brief or something, Fine art seems to be a little bit more of a defined statement of something that you're creating. And so I like to think personal projects is a little bit more looser and broader and more open to, maybe you're a food photographer and you're shooting other food stuff. That's your own, it's not a client brief, it's your own version you want to create. So that's a personal project to me. Yeah.
Great. What's on the horizon? Can you give us a peek?
Well, I would love to continue the new abnormal, depicting more sort of the everyday kind of like almost banal things that, everyday life thing depicted in this, sadly, like this climate change stuff has gotten even worse than what I had originally thought was nightmarish and that I imagined. It's like now we're seeing this like flooding and, crazy, floods and fire, not only in California, and it's not just isolated California anymore. It's like the entire American West and Canada, and now the flooding in Western Europe and in New York, New Jersey. That was insane, So if I could continue the new abnormal in setting of like a kid's birthday party or other everyday scenes, and what that would look like in this future age of climate change. That would be something I would love to continue doing.
So there's a question from Wyatt Smith. Do you cast your human subjects or do you use friends? When you conceive of an image you want to create, does that determine who you shoot? Or do you try multiple people until it fits?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Good question. Sometimes I do just grab my friend because but other times I do casting. It depends too on the scene I'm shooting. Like the guy who was vaping in the giant cross, scene, that one, I cast that one because I was looking for a little Jesus-ish look, which he had. Jesus smoking or vaping. So it's a combination of both tactics because yes, in that series, you'll see some are casted models and some are just friends.
Here's an interesting question from Jessica. I think I understand how dark humor unfolds in stand-up comedy set or a movie, play, or TV show. How does dark humor unfold in a photograph, especially in terms of comedic timing? Can you point to the joke? How does the joke travel?
Oh God, that's such a hard question.
Go after Jessica.
Jessica. I don't know. It's a different. I know what you're coming from, Jessica, because she's a writer and works in a different. I think photography has a different kind of approach and craft of. That's a little bit different in what Jessica describes in terms of comedic timing, because there really isn't the timing thing with photography. I think it's just a frozen moment, if you will, and a larger statement. It's different forms of storytelling. How about that?
Okay. And just give us a little bit of insight into your post-processing with each photograph.
The post-production process. Some of them were complicated. They were shot in plates because when I shot it, I chased the fog in the Bay Area to get the density in the air because I was emulating, right, that awful smoky sky. But the sky didn't look like that, right? So I chased the foggy days, which in San Francisco there were quite a lot, and I would just find that day to shoot so that I had the elements of the sky. And then because that was kind of unpredictable, I would shoot the model in a studio, and then with the two plates, put them together and then do the coloring and the lighting and everything. So.
And do you do your own post or you have a digital artist that you work with from Dana?
A little bit of both, but mostly I rely on a retoucher to do more of the complicated stuff. I can do some, but I think there are other people who do it better than me. And I think that's a real important thing to talk about with personal projects, because often they are self-funded, right? You don't have a client paying for it and you tend to do everything, and you can't do everything. But there are some things that I know that I need better people to do it for me, and that is retouching too. Some people can do some really amazing work.
All right, last question. How many popsicles did you sacrifice versus enjoy for making America great again?
I think some popsicles met their death about like a handful, maybe 10
Okay.
kind of melted to death. I didn't eat any because I don't eat popsicles, but.
Okay. Well, that was really great. Thank you very, very much, Susan. That was terrific.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. All right. So we'll take a minute and get John set up, and we'll be going.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, Jay, let's get John to control the set.
So I am muted myself. I guess that's.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can I introduce him or we're waiting a minute?
No, he's ready to go, right, Jay?
Yep.
Yep,
Okay,
you're on.
great. So John Davidson actually has 2 images in the APA Awards this year. He has the winning image in portraits, but he also has an image in the documentary category. So again, if you go to apanational.org, you can see all the images. John Davidson is a commercial and editorial photographer who has worked with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, British Airways High Life, and National Geographic Traveler UK, among others. He's a regular contributor to Texas Monthly. John also works with cutting-edge tech startups and global corporations, creating corporate branding imagery and executive portraits. He's particularly interested in collaborating with purpose-driven companies and those who working to be the force for good. He's currently based in Austin, Texas, but originally from Manchester, England. He has yet to come up with a satisfactory answer to the oft-asked question, what are you doing in Texas? So present John Davidson.
Thank you very much. Let's share my screen. Oh, the host disabled participant screen sharing. So somebody needs to unhook me.
Give it a shot, John.
Okay, let's go. There we go. Okay. Well, that's not where it's supposed to be. Hold on one second and we'll get there. All right, there we go.
Look away.
All right, yeah, no surprises. So yeah, I'm currently based in the increasingly isolated island of Austin in the state of Texas. My theme here is reinvention. I've taken it for a couple of reasons. I think as creatives, we don't really have a choice but to reinvent ourselves. And sometimes it might just be a small measure of just kind of shifting our direction a little bit. Other times you can change everything about what you're doing. I think we're often resistant to change, and sometimes we just feel completely stuck. And I would hope that one of the things that comes through here is that, that you don't have to feel penned in and stuck, that reinvention is possible. I don't think what I've done here is extraordinary. It's actually the opposite, is that change is very possible. Before I go to that, this is the image that won the portrait section. It's of James White. James White was the founder and guiding spirit of the Broken Spoke, which is a honky-tonk bar in Austin. It advertises itself as the last true Texas dance hall. I was photographing it for National Geographic Traveler as part of a series on Austin. I think what I will take away from this shoot is the kindness of Mr. White. You go into the Broken Spoke and there are pictures all over the walls of him with Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, pretty much every major star of country music for the last 30 years, 40 years. It was 1964 that he opened it. He's used to having photographers there. George Strait photographed an album cover there. But when I went in there, he treated me as though I was the first photographer that had ever shown up to shine a light on his place. He couldn't have been more lovely. This is kind of a stolen portrait in a way, because I was walking from one room to the other, and I just saw him standing at the bar, lost in thought. So, I pressed the shutter on this image, and just as I did so, he saw me out the corner of his eye and gave me a big, broad grin. And I snapped the shutter again. And on the one hand, you might say that the second portrait is the more accurate portrait because it really conveys his warmth and who he was as a person. But it's nowhere near as interesting an image. I already knew the first image was the one. There's an added poignancy to this movie, to this picture. James White passed away earlier this year at age 81. But I loved my experience of going there and working with him. This is the image that placed second in the photojournalism documentary category. So Brian Manley, who is now the former police chief of Austin. This image was taken in the early part of what became a difficult summer for him. He came under a lot of pressure for police reaction to Black Lives Matter protests, and ultimately resigned about 9 months later. The location of this portrait, we went to the studio, sorry, not the studio, to the police station, and we were packed off into this small PR room, and it was just a completely blacked out PR room. The only decoration, there was an Austin police sign on the wall, and then a lectern for him to speak from, right, when he's doing press conferences. So it had zero personality whatsoever. So while we were waiting for him, you know, I wanted to look outside and see what the possibilities were. Obviously, I had to open the blinds to do that, so that's where one immediate thought came from. And the other thing is, I liked the fact that the US flag was there. You know, policing has been a part of the national conversation for a couple of years now, so I liked that referenced it. I had my assistant, it was a bright sunny day, but I had my assistant go out with a strobe and just hit him with the strobe just to make the lighting more dramatic. But as I say, he's no longer the chief of police. So the reinvention, this first image was actually taken in the bleachers at Hollywood High School. I moved to Los Angeles from Manchester when I was 21. I'm obviously not the first callow youth to head there and thinking of glamour and possibilities. And since I couldn't play any music, but I thought I could handle a camera, I headed out to Los Angeles. I always say Los Angeles is a great place to be young and stupid. So I was absolutely perfectly placed at that time. I mean, I actually love Los Angeles still. So I moved to Los Angeles when I was 21. Mostly what I was doing was model test shots. These are a couple of examples. They're not very well scanned, but these are, I believe they were Ektachrome that I cross-processed in C41 or the other way around. All of this stuff was analog at this time, obviously. I spent a lot of time sitting on my toilet in the bathroom with an enlarger across the back of the toilet and small bathroom inhaling chemicals, printing all my images. So I pursued this for about 3 or 4 years. I was trying to get assistant work, but failing miserably. And, you know, there's the kind of joke about actors in Los Angeles all being seen with what I really want to do is direct shirt. And I started writing for magazines, and literature has always been my overriding passion. And I remember I was walking out of Elite Models at obviously a big modeling agency, one of the premier agencies in the country. And the woman that I spoke with, I just thought she was wretched. And I walked out, and somehow I knew that I was done. You know, I should have had my own t-shirt, should have been, but what I really want to do is write. So my photography adventure ended for a long time then. I spent a couple of years in Los Angeles trying to work on a novel. I moved to New York, and you know, I was writing for magazines. I talk about this as my years working for my own nonprofit, because, you know, making a living as a writer is very traumatic, to say the least. You know, I was working in restaurants too often to keep the roof over my head. I started a second novel, didn't finish the first. I was doing stuff like this for Dazed and Confused. I did a profile of Nat Finkelstein, who was a photographer who was part of the Warhol crowd in the 60s. He was bringing a book out of pictures of Edie Sedgwick that I was interested in. So I wrote a profile of him. And that's the kind of work that I did, you know, for the better part of 10 years in New York. Towards the end of my time in New York, I bought a digital camera, a little 5.6 megapixel thing. And I think, you know, really what I was doing was kind of an Instagram, or the way that Instagram really used to be. It's obviously a different beast now, but I was really walking around and just capturing stuff that caught my eye, that I thought was interesting. I think for myself, I've had periods where it's very clear that the ideas that I get are visual, and other periods where it's verbal. It doesn't seem to be both. It's a little impractical to be both, I think. But for me, those things kind of sway a little bit. Whoops, went ahead one. On the left here is Edward Blumenfeld. I watched a documentary about him a couple of weeks ago, and I learned that he didn't take a professional photograph until he was 44, which I found kind of humbling, given the quality of his work and all that he accomplished. But I raised the point because I was pretty much approaching the same age, and this is where reinvention truly happened. I think, as you can see, we're always evolving, right? But at this point, I truly had to reinvent myself. In a sense, you would think that being 43 or whatever and starting out on a photography career is kind of late. And I think the reason that I was able to do it, there are two reasons. One is that I didn't know that I couldn't do it. And the other reason is that I had to make it work, because otherwise, I didn't know, I'd end up doing something that I had no interest in for a living. So I think those are the two things that guided me. I'd moved to Los Angeles ostensibly to finish my novel, but that didn't happen. I had a friend who was opening what became an award-winning restaurant. I helped him open it, and he needed images for his website. And I said, I can do that. So I shot the images for his website, and I actually went to look back for them, for this presentation for the first time in, 10 years. And they're absolutely wretched, and that's why you're not seeing any of them here. They're not good. Anyway, this was an image that I took for one of his spin-off restaurants. And so I found myself doing a lot of food photography. I've done quite a lot of food photography, but I've never actually considered myself a food photographer. And I think that's because the stuff that always interested me more was, I sometimes feel bad saying this because lots of people do want to be food photographers. But it was the stuff that went on around it. It was the chef portraits. It was the narrative stuff about the kitchen. But most of the work that I did for a couple of years was restaurant related while I started building up the clientele. The other thing about when I started taking photographs is that I'd been married for a little over a year. And my wife was pregnant with our first kid. And is there a better time to start a new business from scratch with no clients than when that's all going on, right? But that's what I did. And my wife hasn't divorced me yet, despite the obvious temptations. Having done that for a couple of years, I felt like I needed to pivot because I didn't feel like I had the passion for food photography that I would need to sustain a living based on that. And around that time, I was seeing work that was coming out of the Bay Area that represented startup culture and technology. And I thought it was really interesting. For a long time, corporate photography had a bad name. You think of corporate photography and you think of a portrait of a lawyer with the high school blue mottled background behind him and flat lighting. And it seemed to me that the way that we work was changing. It seemed a very colorful new world, and I felt like it was providing an opportunity to really investigate that. The other thing that made me go down that direction was purely practical, in the sense that tech is the engine that drives the economy in Austin, and I didn't see anybody else that was really doing this work. So that's what I started pursuing.
John,
yes.
Just part of this journey is also a survival instinct.
Yes. I mean, that has to be a part of your toolkit, right? Is recognizing what's coming before you need a life raft.
Right.
It's over a period of 5 or 6 years. It's interesting that This stuff that seemed like brand new as a way of working has already gone through a journey where, you know, the pictures of employees playing table tennis and, you know, ping pong and all of that has become its own cliche. And now we're in a world where most people are working from home. So, you know, there are different challenges that are arising here. How do you tell a story of people working from home being one, and describing your company culture? A lot of the work that I've done has been, you know, team photographs, team culture, and trying to come up with interesting ways to portray that, and then executive portraits. I've been doing the tech stuff for a couple of years. Obviously, I was doing other stuff, but that was a market that I was aiming myself at most squarely. When the Me Too movement started bubbling to the surface. And it seemed to me that the stories that we were hearing were all coming out of Silicon Valley. And I wondered how they applied, if they applied, to the women in tech in Central Texas. So I started a project, a personal project based on this. The title comes from a book that I bought my wife. It's a book of portraits throughout the centuries, and each one shows a woman reading a book. And the title of the book was Women Who Read Are Dangerous. So I kind of hijacked that and made it Women Who Tech Are Dangerous. As you can see, it has its own standalone website, womenwhotechAredangerous.com. The thing that I did with this project was, you know, I photographed and interviewed 40 women from all levels of tech, from women who were just entering the workplace to senior executives to founders. But it gave me the opportunity to marry the two things, right? I was getting to write and to take photographs. You know, very early
How did
on,
you contact them?
you know, well, I contacted the ones that I knew, but I also contacted companies that I did work with. I would let them know and tell me if you have anybody that you would that you think, you know, would be interested in participating. But also, and then each woman that I photographed generally had a recommendation. I know somebody else who, so it evolved over that. I've given a number of presentations on this project. Most notably, I was invited to present it at South by Southwest in 2019, I believe.
Are they all based in Texas?
Yes. Most of them are actually based in Austin. There's some based in San Antonio.
And then are there stories on your website?
On the website, the interviews with them are all on the website. You know, one of the kind of interesting things about these portraits are obviously have a little darkness to the imagery there. Sometimes they'd be photographing the women and might say, can I smile? I thought, of course you can smile. You know, I wanted to capture something of you, but at the same time, this is going to be the main featured photograph. And given what we're talking about, you know, probably hilarity isn't the chief thing that we want to think of. But what that made me do instead, which was a little ambitious, was do a secondary portrait of each person in which they got to be, they were a little bit lighter. You know, frequently I only had like an hour with somebody. So doing two setups was challenging, and some of the, like this is one of the secondary portraits I did. You know, sometimes it works better than others, but I didn't want them to feel that, you know, if it was all portraits of women looking very seriously into the camera, I didn't want them to look like they were being lined up against the wall, right? Waiting for the firing squad.
Were you photographing them one at a time, or did you have a day where they came in?
Yeah, the project took me about a year. I did it over the course of about a year.
And were you going to their location, or did you have a studio where they?
Most they came to the studio. Some I went to there, like, yeah, obviously the ones in San Antonio. I went down there, and you know, it's a relatively simple setup, so it was portable. But most of them were done in the same studio. You know, I think when I look at my work, the two things that connect, the threads that run through them really in terms of the work that I relate to is obviously the people element, but also a narrative element. This is from one of my favorite projects that I did. I got to spend a day and a half photographing summer camps. There was a boys' summer camp and a girls' summer camp right next to one another. In England, we don't have summer camps. You can make a pretty good case that we don't have summer, but certainly summer camp was a concept that was alien to me a little bit. I'd heard about it, obviously. I've lived in the States a long time, but I didn't truly understand it. And when I went there, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic, the opportunities these kids are getting. You know, I was fortunate that I had a very broad brief of go down there, spend some time and find the story. So I just got to wander around for a day and a half watching these kids have a ball. You know, these are a couple of images from the girls' camps. You know, that looks like a bunch of boys making that mess, doesn't it? You know, but I really connect with the narrative element and just being able to run free a little bit. You know, most of my work at this point more of my work, I should say, has become portrait based. The image of Donnie Donegan, he really was the voice of Bambi. He was fascinating. You could have told, like, written 5 different stories about him. He did the voice of Bambi when he was like 8. He was orphaned when he was 11. You know, he won boxing awards while he was in the army, hence the boxing pose. He won two bravery awards in the Korean War, and just on and on and on. He currently mentors students. So anyway, he was really interesting and lives in the middle of nowhere, Texas, San Angelo. You know, obviously, most of us had time on our hands during the pandemic, right? And most of us have taken on some personal projects or other. This was started a little bit late in the day. You know, I don't think it would have worked in the beginning because, you know, we were all obviously hibernating and didn't know quite what was safe. This project was inspired by an article in the New York Times, Cultural Depression, and it was speaking about not only people in the performing arts, not only have they lost their livelihood, but they've lost their sense of identity because they're not performing. And, you know, performing is such a big part of who they are. The article ran, I think, in the end of December of last year. So I was a little late starting the project. Obviously, by this time, you know, we kind of had a better sense of what was safe and what wasn't. I was obviously masked and social distancing, but I photographed a number of people, like actors, dancers, musicians, theatre director, theatre owner. In a sense, I would have liked to have taken this a little bit further, but, you know, I was pitching it to places and there was a common thread about, no, not another pandemic story. So, you know, I kind of drew that to a close. You know, one of the things that the pandemic has given us time for is to consider what's next, where we want to go, what we want to be doing. You know, it's a time where it's ripe for reinvention. These are a couple of images that I shot for a local nonprofit, Urban Roots Farming. It's an organization that teaches disadvantaged youth about farming and sustainability. And, you know, these kids get to grow their own crops, see it from seed all the way through to eventually selling their crops at farm. So they get to see the whole chain. It's a fantastic organization. And I think for me, this is kind of an example of what I want to pursue and where I see myself. That, you know, no matter where we are on the political spectrum, I think the one thing we can all agree on at this point is the world seems to have gone to shit, right? And so I think for me, it's a question of like finding something, a more meaningful way of projecting something that isn't that way. And that's why I'm trying to kind of aim my work at people and businesses and corporations that are a force for good, that are actually trying to do meaningful and positive work. You know, this was another image from that series, Land, Health, Food, Community. That seems, I felt like a pretty good note to end on.
So, John, is the writing piece for you in your rearview mirror now?
Yeah.
And is that easy to let go?
Yes and no. You know, I spent probably a total of 5 years working on 2 different novels. And I think if they were going to happen, they would have happened. I think this, you know, a couple of things happened with the second one, but one of which was that I started thinking visually. But also you know, I'd moved to Austin, and the idea of supporting myself in some way, I was still writing when I moved to Austin, but you know, there was no way to support myself as a writer in Austin. So I had to come up with something else. You know, one interesting conversation that I had, my first very round of photography, my business was Words and Images by John D. Because around the time of the dot-com bust, 2008, 2009, you know, magazines, writers were jumping off buildings in New York because all magazines were closing and budgets were shrinking. And I had this notion that maybe, you know, I can do both. I can write and I can take photographs. Maybe I can sell myself this way by doing both. But pretty early on, I was advised by someone that that's not going to work. You're not going to be treated seriously as a photographer if you're pitching yourself as a writer. So, you know, I'd been writing for, I don't know, 15 years by then. You know, I was kind of done with the struggle. I know there's an irony to the fact of, you know, moving into photography, which none of us really do with the notion that we're going to get rich. Certainly I didn't. But, you know, I thought that it might at least allow me to be solvent.
Survival is the new success.
Yes, yes. More than ever, right?
Yeah. So it's so partially a survival instinct, right?
Yeah.
I've got kids, I've got this, I've got that.
Yeah, but you know, but at the same time, it's something that had obviously been there with me. You know, at starting out, my first job out of school, I was printing photographs for ad agencies and professional photographers. You know, so I was doing that right up until the time I left for the States.
Right.
You know, and obviously, like I said, I was like 21. I had a Minolta 700. I had a bike and $1,500. There was a long way for me to start, right, to get anywhere in photography.
Yeah.
You know, but I felt like the writing, if it was gonna really happen in a more meaningful way or sustainable way, it would already have happened.
Yeah, makes sense. So winning these awards, how do you promote yourself?
Well, you know, obviously we all have to promote ourselves on Instagram, right? I'm sure many photographers at this point have mixed feelings about Instagram, but it's an absolute necessity. You have to be on there. You know, I don't really use Twitter professionally too much. You know, it's Twitter's its own minefield. You know, it's so in terms of the promotions, you know, I'm going to have some postcards made up. We were talking earlier off camera about the idea that it's hard to know that you're reaching people right now with print emails. You know, I've just sent all these booklets out that I've been sitting on for a year, and I write a note with each one. And frequently I started out with, I hope this note finds you well. I hope it finds you, period. Because, you know, we've got no idea, right, whether it's actually going to find anybody. But at the same time, you can't not do it, right? I think, you know, and obviously sending out email blasts and all of that. And honestly, I mean, I think the print stuff probably has as good a chance of being seen as the email stuff, because people are so bogged down in emails. Certainly, you know, art directors, editors, I don't know how they're managing the number of emails they're getting. But I think, you know, they're very easily missed as well. So I think, you know, it's really about trying to get seen in as many places, putting your work in as many places as possible, so that it either becomes a recurring image that people latch onto.
And
you know,
is the Austin community a very tight community? You know, the photographers, ad agencies, musicians, writers.
I have mixed feelings about it. Certainly, I have my own community of photographers here. who I like and respect, and we share information where nobody plays their cards close to their chest. It's like we're all trying to raise one another up. But that's a small segment of that community. I when people hear my accent, I always get, "Don't you love Austin?" And I always think it's about half as good as you think it is, honestly. It's very self-congratulatory.
Yeah. Okay, so there you are.
I probably shoot myself in the foot by saying this too much, but
So, I have a question. Do you pitch stories?
yes, I do, and increasingly I do. I think as part of that journey that I just shared, shows it's evolved, right? I mean, the first couple of years that I was taking photographs, as anybody who becomes a photographer is, you're taking what you can get. And it seemed that I was getting, a lot of photography work. And then the next step is really kind of defining what is it that I want to do. It's an ongoing conversation that you have to have, right? But I think really over the past year or 18 months, I do see my work going in a direction that is more narrative based, and that does lend itself to, possibly writing as well, reporting.
So I thought it was interesting in your bio that you talk about wanting to work with purpose-driven companies and those working to be a force of good. I think one of the challenges when you're working for corporations is what happens when a corporation contacts you to do a corporate portrait and their morality or whatever it doesn't align with yours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily feel that I come across that too much. I did have somebody approach me not that long ago. Who's overtaken at the risk of getting political, a very staunchly right-wing production company and media business, and it's somebody that I'd worked with before, and he just landed there and he wanted me to fly out to Nashville and do this project, and that was not something that I was really interested in doing. But I think in terms of companies and corporations, it's not really something that to this point has come up. Doesn't mean it won't.
I mean, that's always a tough issue, right? I mean, you have mortgages to pay and kids,
yeah.
Right? I mean,
everybody draws a line at a different point in the sand, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So what's next, John? I mean, what's on the horizon for you? I mean, projects.
So I have a couple of things, companies that I'm talking to, or institutions, in Austin, as you know, in Texas, the governor banned mask mandates. I have two kids that are at school, 10 and 7, and Austin Independent School Districts overrode the mask mandate, said everybody has to wear masks. It seems that we're getting to the point where vaccinations are the next things for kids of age between 5 and 12. So I have a meeting set up, nothing set yet, but I've had conversations with the head of communications for Austin School District about taking portraits of kids, whether they're being vaccinated, after they've been vaccinated, to promote the sense that let's all get vaccinated.
Right. Okay.
I have another company that I'm meeting with also that works with strives to get minorities, racial minorities, more integrated into creative jobs in the creative workspace, whether it's advertising agencies, graphic designers, and there's mentorships and stuff like that. And I'm about to have a conversation with them. They would need some more images to show their culture and and do maybe mentorship, something like that.
Yeah, I know that they've been out there. The One Club for Art and Copy, they merged with the Art Directors Club. They have a big diversity outreach going on for ad agencies to get minorities, jobs in the ad if that.
I think one of the, aside from the fact that it was an area that I felt myself drawn to, one of the, we're all doing portfolio reviews online, online portfolio reviews, and I met with an art director who owns an agency, and she thought that idea was really interesting, and that you could actually build a brand around that you're the guy that that you go to when you're trying to tell a story, and be in the fight for good.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing wrong about being in the fight for good. That's
I've been bad long enough.
yes, all of us. We're trying anyway. Well, any other questions by anyone? We could open up the mics if anyone wants to jump in. What stands out for me is that he was a storyteller, whether with words or images, and both came out great. From Louisa, fine work, John. Yeah. If you check the chat room, there's a lot of good stuff coming your way.
Okay. Thank you.
Juliet.
I'm good. I have no more questions.
Okay.
Sounds so official.
No. If there's something you wanted to talk to.
No. I mean the way I answered that.
Yes. Yeah.
It sounds like he's being questioned.
Yeah.
All photographers on the spot.
Yes.
Hey, Frank.
Yes.
It's Glenn. How you doing?
Hey, Glenn. How are you?
Good. John, I love your work.
Thank you very much.
And I mentioned in the chat it was just only last week that I bookmarked that first shot of that older cowboy, who passed away, just because I thought it was just wonderful. So I'm a creative director in advertising. Please feel good about Instagram. I'm endlessly on it. Every minute that I'm not doing something else between meetings, between Zoom meetings, my phone's in the other hand, when the mouse is in the other. So I'm endlessly looking for people who I don't know. I'll be frank, I didn't know who you were, but I do now.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think that is the refrain that you hear, and that's why I say as a photographer you have to be on there. And it's not like it's a prison sentence or anything, but we make of it what we do. But thank you for that, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, that's it sounds like you need a rep.
It's possible. Yeah. Just before I neglected to thank you, Frank and Juliet. Thank you for the opportunity here. It's been lovely getting to know you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here.
No, and like I always say, when there's another project and you want to talk about it, everyone's invited back.
Thank you.
Because that's the whole idea is this. The whole idea really is that Glenn knows who you are. Here's a creative director who just met 3 terrific photographers. That's really, that's the dream, and the feedback back and forth. So that's that's a win for everybody. And Glenn's a really great guy, all things considered.
Thanks, Frank.
I did say all things considered.
You could have left that out, Frank. You could have.
Nah, I miss you too much, Glenn. I don't
But
want you
how might I contact you? I don't know whether you can direct message me, but so that I can clutter your email still further.
Well, I believe I'm following you now.
Okay.
So anything you put up, so earlier you mentioned, it's sort of a necessary, I wouldn't call it necessary evil, but necessary.
Yeah.
So, good work. A lot of people say you shouldn't put too much up on there. Other people say the opposite. I would say the opposite, because good work, I'm never going to get bored, right? So you can never put too much up there that are going to go, wow, you're overdoing it. That's nonsense. I just want to see good work and I saw it tonight by 3 different unique shooters, but so I'm just letting you know, everyone that I know in the business is looking at, and the art buyers are looking at Instagram endlessly, and anybody who should, and who's an art director and creative director should be doing the same, and most of them do.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's all true. And the great thing that that Dana referenced before about getting that list every 3 months, he sends out a note to somebody. You don't know where it's coming from, but you got to be out there. That's the key.
I am curious. I just had a question, John. Do you tell a story when you do your Instagram posts? Do you do very descriptive stories behind it, or do you just tag a couple of things and stuff?
Yeah, I don't write shoot, I don't typically write. Occasionally I do if I think there's, you know, a story to it, but it is not the norm where I write a whole thing on it. Sometimes I do, and sometimes it's just an informational tag.
Okay, so Juliet, you want to tell us anything else about APA?
Oh my gosh, we have so much going on. It's, I mean, just last night we had 3 different events. So be sure to check out the website at apanational.org because we have tons of stuff going on all the time. At American Photographic Artists for the YouTube channel where you can watch past programming. For the Instagram feed is at American Photographic Artists. So if you're a pro level member, now is the time. We're talking about print. We do a source book. It's free for the pro and leader levels to be in, but they do need to upload an image. So now is the time to do that. And we send that out. It is a way for us to reconnect with art buyers and creatives who judge our contests, who participate on different panels we have. So we send the book out to them. So that's my reminder to everybody.
Well, I want to thank our presenters, Juliet, for teaming up with us here at Projections. I do want to remind everyone to please go to YouTube and subscribe to Projections NYC so we can have you seeing our videos, because as these presentations are done, you'll get notices that they're up on the YouTube site. So you'll get all these notices. So
thank you for hosting this, Frank. This is great.
Yeah, we'll do it again, and if there's anything that comes up in the middle of the year, you want anything, we'll always we're always looking for ways to help photographers. That's the goal.
Great, it's a good
All right.
way. And thank you to
Thank you so
Susan
much
and
for the
John
opportunity.
and Dana.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Stefan. So we'll see you next time.
Have a great evening, everyone.
All right, everyone.
Take care,
Hi
everyone.
to all my
Thanks,
friends
Frank.
who are watching.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nina.